Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Working in Hockey podcast. Lucas is here with me, fresh off our first networking event in New Jersey the other night. We'll get into that later, but we've got a very special guest joining us here today. Sydney Delcontivo, currently the manager of player safety for the PWHL. Sydney, I can't wait to get into this role with you, but first and foremost, how's the season going so far?
Thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be with you. Season's good. We're about 2 weeks in and off and running, and it's been great so far.
Absolutely. No, the on ice product has looked great, and I hope your life hasn't been too stressful there the first couple of weeks of the season. But for those who don't know, Sydney, what does the manager of player safety do? What does your role entail or look like day to day there?
Yeah, so player safety, for those that don't know, is the assessment of supplemental discipline to any egregious on ice activity, commonly assessed, as fans would know, in the form of a warning, a fine, or a suspension. My role with the PWHL specifically consists of sort of logging all of our games, distributing any relevant materials to our player safety committee, comprised of Cassie Campbell Pascal, Megan Duggan, Mike Murphy, and Matt McMahon. Matt and Mike have served in the NHL for several years. Matt with player safety, Murph with hockey operations, and Cassie and Megan's resumes in women's hockey speak for themselves, and they're just phenomenal people. And then we're chaired by Jana Hefford, so she's kind of in charge of making all of our decisions and steering the standard for our group. So collaborating with that group of stakeholders on a sort of a day-to-day basis as far as what the days look like. Every day is different, as I'm sure you guys know. Depending on what happens in the game the night before, depends on what my day looks like as far as is something under review? Are we writing a report? Are we putting a suspension video together? Are we answering questions for people? Things like that are sort of the common, I guess, day-to-day duties that my role encompasses, but get to cross-functionally collaborate with various stakeholders, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you just mentioned how like even day to day varies quite a bit. But something I've always been curious about with a role in player safety is how does your role differ in the summer versus when games are being played in season?
It's a great question. Obviously, in the season, we've got a really busy schedule. We play pretty much every day when we're playing games and that sort of thing. But in the summer, it's more my role is also sort of encompassing of the rulebook editorial process. So I'm the person that is writing rules along with David Tavarov, who is our director of officiating, strategy and operations, and just kind of collaborating to get the book done, printed, all of those things. So it's a little bit more, I guess, administrative work, for lack of a better term, in terms of what rules are being tweaked and changed, and then doing year over year analysis of our player safety database to inform those rule changes and trends that we're seeing. Collaborating with the officiating department on standards and teaching videos and things like that, and then also working with our player experience group and sort of the work that goes into kind of prepping players for orientation and the start of the season and all that good stuff. So a little bit of a different process in the off season compared to the hecticity of the regular season, but it's definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, different process, but I'm sure still just as busy with, like you said, the preparation and learnings from year over year, especially as the league continues to grow. Want to continue with talking about your role with the PWHL there, but first I want to get back a little bit in your career here, Sydney. I know you first started in player safety with the USHL, an opportunity there in 2022. Where did your interest or passion initially come from for player safety, and how'd you kind of land that first step in your career there?
Yeah, so I got involved with player safety kind of by accident, and through the USHL entirely, actually. So I found my former boss, Evan Rand, through LinkedIn. Evan has now moved on to work in private equity, but is a fantastic person. Used to work for the NHL's Department of Player Safety, and was a fantastic first boss. And we just had a chat one day, and for about 15 minutes, and he was like, well, what can I do to help you? And I, as a college freshman at the time, was just kind of looking for some form of mentorship and, just some form of an opportunity and a chance to not necessarily prove myself, but to kind of get some experience under my belt and start building my hockey resume. And Evan said, we need help occasionally clipping video with our player safety committee. Is that something you would be interested in? And I said, as a visually impaired person, I would give it a try. I couldn't guarantee that I was going to be perfect at it, but I wanted to give it a go. And he said, okay. And, um, took some time and thought about it and was like, why wouldn't I do this? And so just started clipping video for the USHL on a once a month basis, and really got to collaborate closely with Scott Zelkin and Dennis LaRue, who chaired the committee at the time, and Sean Morgan, who also sat on the committee along with Evan. And just got to learn a lot and be a sponge and soak up as much information as I could. And in that first kind of 9 or 10 months, however long that was, in that learning process, really figuring out, okay, I kind of do like this. This is fun. It kind of combines all of the things in hockey that I love. Analyzing a play, you're building an argument, you're bringing in pieces of rules to figure out, okay, does boarding better apply, or does checking from behind better apply, or is this cross checking or is this high sticking, and what are the nuances there? And those things really stuck out to me as things that I really enjoyed, and quickly came to fall in love with, and just kind of thought that that was something that I wanted to continue doing.
That's awesome. That's an awesome story. And you said it, but just to circle back and make sure everybody heard that, Sydney, you found somebody through LinkedIn, you networked with them, and you got your foot in the door, correct?
I did, yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Lucas, that's my question. Lucas, over to you.
Yeah, sounds good. It's a very important point that we always try to hammer home. And then from the USHL, you spent a season with the ECAC hockey doing player safety and some hockey operations as well. How did the ECAC differ from the USHL, and what were you able to take from that experience, maybe that you didn't get in your initial experience?
Yeah, I think the ECAC was fantastic. First of all, Doug Christensen, who was formerly the deputy commissioner of the USHL, moved over to the ECAC that summer to be their commissioner, and called me one day. And I had done some work for Doug kind of earlier in the season and through the summer, and did a couple projects. And he called me and was like, "Do you want to come with me and do what you do for the USHL every weekend for the ECAC?" And I said, "Sure, yeah." Um, I think that's a great step for my development, and it provided me an opportunity to learn a lot more and do a little bit of some different stuff as well, continue doing some of those side projects and things like that to aid the ECAC with their work. It was a little bit of a smaller office in just the sheer number of people as well. And so that was really fun to be able to go somewhere else, meet different people, continue to learn. The process in terms of player safety was different as well as far as what we were reviewing in the USHL. It was a certain section of what we'll call dangerous minor penalties, as well as your, fighting, game misconduct, that sort of generic stuff. And then with the ECAC, it was just major penalties. So we were looking at a bunch of different things, and the severity is different in college hockey compared to junior. And so seeing that standard adjust and figuring out what my niche was in that sense as well, and being provided the opportunity to learn and soak up as much as I could in another spot was something that I really enjoyed and found a lot of freedom in, and that sort of thing. And Doug and Peter Fiola, who was their men's director of officiating, Brian Hicks, who was the women's director of officiating, and Nick Skrbinski, who's the associate commissioner, were fantastic to me and just great to work with.
And as you mentioned, like as always, there's always learning curves with anything you do, right? What are some of those learning curves or adjustments that you grew through with the USHL and the ECAC that you can remember? Maybe at first having trouble with something and learning how to kind of navigate through it.
Well, I think that that's a great question, and learning is such a big part of those early roles, right? And figuring out, not just what you like, but what you don't like. And for me, with the USHL, something that I discovered really early that I needed to have as a tool was how to have an opinion and not be afraid to stray from it. There were times where we would be discussing a play, and Dennis would come around on the call to me and be like, "Okay, Sid, what do you think?" And I would have to sit there and give the entire group my thoughts and why I thought that and what I had to support it. And just, learning that is something that I use now when I get a question about a play from someone and they're like, "Hey, Sid, did you see at, 11:32, the player tripped the player behind the net? Like, do you think that that's anything?" And it's on me at that point to look at that and say, "Well, here's what I thought from my notes," or "Here's what I thought when I saw this." And that was just a really valuable skill, I think, to have early on, and just learn from, such great people. In terms of the ECAC and the adjustments, I think I kind of touched on it. The standard is different. The more hockey you see, the more, and just with repetition, the more you do something, the better you get at it. And I think with kind of, learning what the standard was and learning um, what the nuances were at the ECAC level compared to the USHL level. Again, you learn the more that you do, and I think for me there, it was just, here are things that I brought with me that were useful, and these are the things that work for me. This is my process. Being detailed, being prepared, being thorough, and then taking that with me and saying, okay, these are the things that work, and these are the things that I'm going to continue to do, and just having that informed sense of who you are and what works for you, I think, is something that I really honed in on there.
Yeah, that's very well said. And you mentioned kind of just the differences from league to league, level to level with the standard, right? Obviously different now with the PWHL again to jump back to your current role. But you mentioned like Cassie Campbell and Megan Duggan and some of the people that you get to work with and pick their brains. Maybe more of a fan question than a job question, Sydney. But how cool is it now that again you're dealing with a new league and a new standards? You get to pick the brains of some hockey greats. You get to understand how they see the game, how they look at plays. I guess how cool is that is my question.
Well, it's so much fun. Like truly, I mean, I get to work with some of the smartest people that I've ever met on a daily basis. And as someone who comes from Florida and didn't play hockey growing up at all, I fell into hockey just as a fan. And being around people like you said, like Cassie and Megan, and Murph, who had an illustrious career as a coach and a player and an executive. Matt, who spent 10 years in the NHL Department of Player Safety, like even our officiating department. Bill McCreary is our director
Mhm.
of officiating standards, and Katie Gay is our director of officiating training and performance, and or sorry, recruitment. And being able to pick their brains as well as David Tavarov, who I have a great relationship with, and just being able to be around them and to your point, pick their brains and hear how they talk and hear how they think and what kind of things do they look at and how do they implement those into their analysis of a play and things like that. To go back to those other leagues that I've worked for. Um, Dennis Leroux is one of the greatest American referees of all time, and Scott Zelkin is right there with him. And both have fantastic careers to speak for and experience to draw on as well. And those are things that I really enjoyed. Just being able to be around people and be a sponge and learn as much as you can.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So many great hockey minds and good people too that you listed there that want to help, want to see you succeed in the role, want to make the most out of it. You mentioned Bill McCreary. He used to be a member at the golf course that I worked at, and I was like probably 15, and he'd be walking his golden retrievers around the course in the morning, and we'd all like pick his brains, thinking it was so cool. An old NHL ref is just out there walking his dogs with us.
And Sydney, to switch gears a little bit here, we always talk on the show about the evolving technology in sports, and obviously you see it day to day. Things are always changing. We're getting different technology that, whether it be for performance or, in your case, for player safety. How do you see technology continuing to factor into player safety? And for people who may be looking to get into a role within player safety, is there something they need to learn, or a platform or tool they need to get familiar with in order to enter?
Sure, I think that every league has a different sense of what technology they use and what's important to them, because different leagues have different standards. For us at the PWHL, we're very fortunate that we have a central situation room in Toronto that helps to assist in things like goal reviews and game stoppages and major penalty reviews on the ice in conjuncture with the on ice officials. The CSR is a great tool for collaboration for us in terms of getting video and things like that. It's something that we implemented our first season in the playoffs, and then we introduced on a every game basis in our second year. And it's been a great resource for us to be able to draw on during games, and the people that staff that room are fantastic. And so as far as how technology has changed for us in just a 2 year span, it's changed a lot in terms of what we use and how we collaborate and things like that.
Yeah, and online, slow motion is everybody's favorite technology when it comes to player safety. But this one might be a bit of a general question, Sydney, but I want to dive into kind of what player safety in the game means to you. I mean, the game is bigger, faster, stronger than ever at every level. What do we, as maybe rec players or parents of kids playing hockey, what are things that we need to be cognizant of in terms of player safety as the game continues to evolve, get bigger and faster on the ice?
Well, I think when you're talking about player safety and you're talking about risks specifically as they pertain to the game, I think the game is always evolving. It's always changing. Players are always getting bigger and faster and stronger, not just in the women's game, but in the men's game. You see the at the NHL level, the change in pace and physicality all the time, and it's really exciting to watch if you're a fan to see the game evolve like that in front of your eyes. And I think for us in the PWHL, we continue to strive to be innovative as we look at player safety. We view that as a paramount of importance to us, and have done our best to be innovative with rules. If you look at our Rule 48 illegal check to the head, our default is a major penalty in game misconduct. We view that as a very critical thing to our league because we value the safety of our players. So we view that as a paramount importance, and it's significant to us to ensure that we're being innovative and that we are eliminating risk in the best possible way.
And to touch a bit more on kind of the risks of the game today, Sydney, we all hear about concussions, for example, as being a major focus. But what other areas can we continue to make the game of hockey safer?
Well, like I said, I think that you are always going to see risk as a component of hockey. Hockey is a very fast and physical game, and it's played on ice at 100 miles an hour, and we have players skating on very thin blades of ice, right? So naturally, that risk is always going to be there, and it's our job in player safety to uphold the integrity of the game and to do our best to sort of enforce the rules and ensure that we are enforcing sort of applicable standards, and that we are doing our part to keep the players safe and uphold the integrity of the game.
Yeah, and you mentioned it there that, PWHL is only a couple years old. That standard continues to grow and evolve. The players continue to get better. We add teams. We continue to grow the game there. When it comes to the summers and maybe some of those trainings and educational pieces, how do you guys go about, educating to enforce the standards with teams, officials, players through the summer and otherwise there?
That's a great question. We do our best to ensure that we are producing education when we can for our various implicated stakeholders. For us in player safety, we do produce suspension videos. It's my job to put those together from the clipping to the editing to the scripting, and everything that goes into those videos is under my domain, which is awesome and something I enjoy. And that's part of the education process, right? When a player gets suspended, we want to make sure that they have the tools possible to ensure that they're not only making sure that that doesn't happen for themselves, but that they're protecting their opponent when they're on the ice, and that they have the tools necessary to say, okay, I do need to gap up better next time, or I do need to apply less force when I make this check, or I do need to keep my elbow tucked when I deliver this hit through the side of my opponent, and that I can't plow someone through the wall. Things like that are things that we try to stress when we do those videos. And I think that they've been really, I mean, I can't speak for our players, but in my opinion, I think that they've benefited us, and they've allowed us to not just educate our players and our teams, but our fans.
No, that's a great point, especially with the fans. Because sometimes you notice, like, especially me as watching hockey, you're still sometimes learning things as you go, right? You never truly know everything. And you see a lot of divide on Instagram and all these platforms of people when there's kind of plays that are maybe a bit that could go either way necessarily, but it's important to have fans educated too, so they know kind of what the rules and regulations are and what's maybe right and what's not. So obviously the growth of the PWHL has been phenomenal, and it sounds like there is hopefully more expansion to come. What are you personally most excited for as women's hockey continues to grow?
What am I excited about as our game continues to grow? I think honestly, and I firmly believe that we have a fantastic on ice product. Our players are phenomenal. They're so skilled. They're so fast. The physicality, I think, is in a really good spot. I love our game, and I think that it's fantastic, and I think that it's a product that we're all very proud of as a league, and that our players are proud of. And so, what am I excited for? I think that as we continue to evolve and as our league continues to age, we'll say that that will just continue to be at the forefront of what we do. We want to have the best on ice product possible, and I think that that's such a beautiful part of our game.
Yeah, that's awesome. And one other thing I wanted to touch on there, Sydney, is like I said, we had our networking event the other night here in New Jersey, and I think one of the things that Lucas and I and my wife Sam said leaving the event was we were impressed, blown away, and honestly just super happy that 40 of our 85 attendees were females. And they all asked a lot of great questions about females working in the game. And obviously, the on ice product continues to grow with the PWHL and WNBA, etc. But for yourself, as a female who worked in the USHL and other leagues, now to be able to look at a league and say this is a women's league, we have women working in it, we have women playing in it. What does that mean for you, and what is the outlook, I guess, in your eyes for females, women who want to work in sports moving forward here?
I think that that's a great question, and I think that the certainly the presence of women who work in hockey and the we'll say escalation of that and the growth of that has just been fantastic to see in the last few years. I remember before I started working in hockey that that was something I was a little bit nervous about. I would say, in the sense of it is a very male dominated industry, and it was not something that I was expecting to be a part of, to work in a women's professional league. That was never something that was on my bingo card. And yet it's something that I'm so proud of. I love that I get to be a part of creating a space for women to not just play, but to work in a role like this. And that's something that I've tried to do wherever I've gone is hold the door open for whoever walks in through it next. And I think that that's something that we should all be cognizant of doing.
No, that's a great point. And to wrap things up here, we always like to touch on some career advice for our listeners. And you kind of touched on it a bit there, but what's the best piece of career advice you could give somebody who just wants to work in the game of hockey?
There's so much.
Yeah,
How much time do we have?
exactly.
No, I think that I kind of talked about it earlier. Just being a sponge is probably the best piece of advice that I can give someone. Learn as much as you can, ask questions. Everybody loves to give advice, and people like to talk about themselves, but they also want to help people in the sense that they were helped. Like, I'll go back to, working with Evan at the USHL and Scott and Dennis. Those were guys that had people go out of their way to mentor them and help them and guide them and teach them. And those are people that I look back on, and they were so willing to provide that level of mentorship for me and teach me things and say, this is why we look at this way, and this is why we look at this that way. And it was because I was willing to ask questions, and I was willing to sit there and say, I don't understand why we see this way. Why is this the case? And having someone sit there and be like, well, what do you see? And kind of that learning by doing as well. Aspect of it was fantastic for me and for my growth, and now it's something that I have an opportunity to do with the PWHL, and to do for someone else, and to kind of be that mentor, like I was for someone else. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing about our game. And so never be afraid to ask questions, always be willing to soak up as much as you can, listen more than you speak, and don't be afraid to not be the dumbest person in the room, but don't be afraid to not be the smartest person in the room. And there's always someone that you can learn from and something that you can pick up along the way.
I think that's phenomenal advice, and honestly, Lucas, that's one we haven't gotten yet, but I think it's very well said. Of don't be afraid to ask questions, lean on the support system around you, and like you said off the top, Sydney, especially when you've got some of the names around you that you do with the PWHL there. This has been awesome. I mean, I'm even more interested in player safety than I was coming into this conversation. I think, Sydney, if people have questions about maybe your role or reach out to you, is LinkedIn the best spot to find you?
Yeah, you can reach out through LinkedIn.
Well, this has been a pleasure, Sydney. Can't thank you enough. We're jealous of the weather down there in
Yeah.
Florida, and we wish you and the league continued success throughout the season here. All right.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me
Thank you.
on.
Of course.